Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to keep working on drawing inferences and figuring out what things in the story mean based on clues. Today we're going to be working on figuring out how characters feel based on clues in the story. So if you'll get out your government book and turn to page 21, we're going to still be reading the story Stanley's Release. So turn to page 21 and we'll go ahead and get started. You will also need your packet, so if you'll get your packet out, or you can click on it on Google Classroom, either way, but you're looking for Thursday, and I have some extra stuff written here. You won't have that, but just look for Thursday, and that's where we'll start today. And then after you have both of those things, we'll go ahead and get started. If you need some extra time, you can pause the video and hit play when you're ready. So if you don't have your book, I have the text on the computer and you're welcome to use that, or you can follow along in your book, either way. Okay, so our job today, we're going to make inferences about the text. So we're going to be using clues in the text to figure out something that it does not say. Remember, inferences, they don't say it word for word. You have to figure it out based on the clues. To better understand the characters and the feelings. So they're not going to tell us exactly how a character is feeling. We're going to have to figure out how a character feels based on clues in the story. That's our job today, is to figure out how some of these characters are feeling. Okay, so I'm going to read the text to you. If you'll go ahead and follow along, and then we will work on the questions for Thursday, work on drawing inferences from the text. So paragraph 1. It says, they slowly walked back to camp. The tall man was the Texas Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer for the state. Stanley's lawyer was named Miss Marengo. Stanley held the suitcase. He was so tired he couldn't think straight. He felt as if he was walking in a dream, not quite able to comprehend what was going on around him. They stopped in front of the camp office. Mr. Sir went inside to get Stanley's belongings. The Attorney General told Mr. Pendinsky to get the boys something to eat and drink. The warden seemed as dazed as Stanley. You can't even read, she said to Zero. And Zero said nothing. Miss Marengo put a hand on Stanley's shoulder and told him to hang in there. He would be seeing his parents soon. She was shorter than Stanley, but somehow gave the appearance of being tall. Mr. Pendinsky returned with 2 cartons of orange juice and 2 bagels. Stanley drank the juice, but didn't feel like eating anything. Wait, the warden exclaimed. I didn't say they stole the suitcase. It's his suitcase, obviously, but he put my things from my cabin inside it. That isn't what you said earlier, said Miss Marengo. What's in the suitcase? The warden asked Stanley. Tell us what's in it. Then we'll open it and see. Stanley didn't know what to do. Stanley, as your lawyer, I advise you not to open your suitcase, said Miss Marengo. He has to open it, said the warden. I have the right to check the personal property of any of the detainees. How do I know there aren't drugs or weapons in there? He stole a car, too. I've got witnesses. She was nearly hysterical. He is no longer under your jurisdiction, said Stanley's lawyer. He has not been officially released, said the warden. Open the suitcase, Stanley. Do not open it, said Stanley's lawyer, and Stanley did nothing. Mr. Sir returned from the office with Stanley's backpack and clothes. The Attorney General handed Miss Marengo a sheet of paper. You're free to go, he said to Stanley. I know you're anxious to get out of here, so you can just keep the orange suit as a souvenir or burn it, whatever you want. Good luck, Stanley. He reached out his hand to shake, but Miss Marengo hurried Stanley away. Come on, Stanley, she said. We have a lot to talk about. Stanley stopped and turned to look at Zero. He couldn't just leave him here. Zero gave him thumbs up. Can't leave Hector, Stanley said. I suggest we go, said his lawyer with a sense of urgency in her voice. I'll be okay, said Zero. His eyes shifted toward Mr. Pendinsky on one side of him, then to the warden and Mr. Sir on the other. There's nothing I can do for your friend, said Miss Marengo. You were released pursuant to an order from the judge. They'll kill him, said Stanley. Your friend is not in danger, said the Attorney General. There's going to be an investigation into everything that's happened here. For the present, I am taking charge of the camp. Come on, Stanley, said his lawyer. Your parents are waiting. Stanley stayed where he was. His lawyer sighed. May I have a look at Hector's file? She asked. Certainly, said the Attorney General. Miss Walker, go get Hector's file. She looked at him blankly. Well? The warden turned to Mr. Pendinsky. Bring me Hector Zeroni's file. and he stared at her. Get it, she ordered. Mr. Pendinsky went to the office. He returned a few minutes later and announced the file was apparently misplaced. The Attorney General was outraged. What kind of camp are you running here, Miss Walker? All right, so I've read the text again. Now we're going to work on drawing some inferences. So let's look at our questions. Everyone look at your packet or in Google Classroom. You should be looking on the day that says Thursday. Okay, so it says drawing inferences. It says reread paragraphs 19 through 26. So we're going to go back to just those parts. Now let's read our questions first so we know what we're looking for. It says, when Zero reassures Stanley about leaving, how are his words different than his actions? We're going to go back and look at that. I've got some clues here for you, but we'll go back and look at it. And what can you infer about how Zero feels based on his response to Stanley? So we want to know, Zero tells Stanley he's okay, but we want to know how are his words different from his actions? How are his words different from what he actually did? And then based on his actions, how do you know that he's feeling? What inference can you make about how he's feeling? So let's go back to paragraphs 19 through 26. And that is on page, that's on page 22. So everybody should be looking at 22. Okay, paragraph 19. It says, Mr. Sir returned from the office with Stanley's backpack and clothes. The Attorney General handed Miss Marengo a sheet of paper. You're free to go, he said to Stanley. I know you're anxious to get out of here, so you can just keep the orange suit as a souvenir. Or burn it. Whatever you want. Good luck, Stanley. He reached out his hand to shake Miss Marengo. But Miss Marengo hurried Stanley away. Come on, Stanley, she said. We have a lot to talk about. Stanley stopped and turned to look at Zero. He couldn't just leave him here. Zero gave him a thumbs up. So Zero's giving him a thumbs up, like, I'm good, Stanley. Let's keep on going. 24. It says, I can't leave Hector, Stanley said. I suggest we go, said his lawyer with a sense of urgency in her voice. I'll be okay, said Zero. So he's giving him a thumbs up, and he says, I'll be okay. That's what he did. Then it says, or that's what he said. Then it says his eyes shifted toward Mr. Pendinsky on one side of him. So he looks at Zero and he says, I'll be okay. And then he looks at Mr. Pendinsky. Then, so Mr. Pendinsky's on one side. Then to the warden. So he looks back at the warden. And then Mr. Sir. So he looks at Mr. Pendinsky. He looks at the warden. And he looks at Mr. Sir. So he's talking to Stanley. He gives him a thumbs up. Stanley, I'll be okay. And then he looks at the warden and Mr. Pendinsky and Mr. Sir. So based on those things, how's he feeling? So let's go back to our questions. When Zero reassures Stanley about leaving, how are his words different than his actions? So I'm giving you a starter here. I want you to finish it, okay? It says his words were, I'll be okay. His actions were, his eyes shifted. Add one more sentence to that. What else? Like, you explain to me how he was talking and then how he was acting. How are those two different? Right? One more sentence there. I've given you some clues. He says, I'll be okay. So his words are, describe what his words are like, okay? And then his actions were that his eyes shifted back and forth. So he's looking at the warden. He's looking at Mr. Pendinsky. So describe to me what his actions are showing that his words were not. Okay. So you can pause the video now and do that, or we can go ahead and read question 2 and you can do them both at the same time, however you would like to do it. Question 2 says, what can you infer about how Zero feels based on his response to Stanley? So based on the words that he said and the actions, he gave him a thumbs up. He's like, I'll be okay. And then he looks around and he's, based on those two things, how does he really feeling? I can infer, I want you to write a complete sentence and start with, I can infer Zero feels, well, remember Zero's his name, so it needs to be a capital letter, blank, 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 blank. You finish it. How does Zero feel? Based on what he did, how does he feel? Based on his actions and words together, how is he really feeling? I want you to make that a complete sentence. You should start your sentence with, I can infer Zero feels, blah, blah, blah. And so pause the video right now, answer those 2 questions, and then when you are done answering them, you can go ahead and hit play, and we will review the answers, okay? Okay, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and review the answers. Please do not change the answers. If you had something different, don't change them. I wanna see what you had when you come back to school so that I can see what you were able to do on your own. But I do want you to also know the right answers. So please don't change the answers. These are just so that you actually know what they should be, okay? The correct answers, it says 0, tell Stanley he'll be okay, and he gives him a thumbs up. That's what I already had there. But then he shifts his eyes to look at Mr. Pendinsky and the warden and Mr. Sir. So you could have added a sentence there. Remember how I told you that I wanted you to add something there? So you could have said something like Zero's words show that he is fine, but his actions seem to be a little more worrisome, or they show that he's worrisome, or his actions seem to be a little less confident, like he's not so sure he's actually going to be fine. Okay, so based on that, so based on what he said, he says he's fine, and then he does some actions that kind of show that he may not be. He shifts his eyes back and forth. What can you infer? What is he feeling? I can infer this is an answer that you should have had, or something similar. It doesn't have to be these exact words, but something similar to this. I can infer that Zero is worried. He's looking around, he's kind of worried, but he's trying to appear brave for his friend. So he's worried about staying with the warden and Mr. Pendinsky, but he's trying to be brave for Stanley. He's trying to get Stanley to go ahead, go home, Stanley, I'm fine. He doesn't want Stanley to worry. You might have said something like that. He wants Stanley to know that he's going to be okay. Some evidence that we use to answer that question. The text evidence that shows us that he doesn't want Stanley to worry is that he doesn't want Stanley to worry, but he himself is worried. Zero's a little bit scared that he's got to stay there. It's when he shifts his eyes. So when he looks back at Mr. Pendinsky, and then he looks at the warden, and then he looks at Sir, he's like, oh, man, I had to stay with these people. What's going to happen to me? That's how I say, that's our evidence there. Okay. So your answers didn't have to be exactly like these, but something similar. And I will look at them in the Google Classroom. If you need any help or you have any questions, you can ask me a question in the comments. You can have your parents send me a remind, or we can do Google Meet to help you answer some of these questions. All right, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.